Well, what does the check engine light really tell you about your car? What do you do when the check engine light comes on? Most importantly, why is there a car show being aired on Prudent Money? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Good afternoon, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. Tony Joe is here with me, as he is every Friday, to take your Car Corner questions. We do have the lines open if you'd like to talk to Tony Joe, and I'll explain to you who he is here in a second. 1-877-913-5357 is the number to call, and we do have a line open. So, Tony Joe, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay. How are you doing on this Friday?
It's
end of the week.
I'm glad it's Friday.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely glad it's Friday. I'm thinking that people started to get kind of used to Prudent Money being on in this time slot, but may not have heard the program before, and they're probably thinking, "Why are you going to talk about cars on Prudent Money?" And this all started way back. You and I have been doing Fridays on the program for 23 or so years.
Seems like 120.
I know. As young as we are, we must have started just really young.
Right out of high school.
Yeah, maybe right out of high school. And so, this started with Don Spear, and I'll let you chime in on that story. Okay. But we look at it this way. There's very few industries and aspects of life that you're really forced to trust somebody because you don't really understand how things work with automobiles, and there's probably not, or this is one of the higher expense items that you'll come across in your lifetime.
It has become a very high expense item. It used to be, well, it still is, your home, and then your car can be, the next highest expense in life, in your life, and that's not uncommon. And I will just say that it started back in I started in 1990 with Don Spear. For those of you who still remember back then, Don Spear started the program, Prudent Money. I'm not Prudent Money, but
Money Talk.
Money Talk, right. And then he asked me to come and do a 30-minute program because of the expensive cars, and that was back in 1990. So this is nothing new. It was called the Car Corner Edition, and it started off, we would just talk about the corner of the car, but now we talk about the top, the front, heck, even the bottom of the car.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he is making an attempt to be funny.
Never mind.
Scratch
that. Forget everything I just said.
Let me interject something that I forgot to say. We desperately try to pull this off every Friday with a no joke or no Tony Joe joke. Rule of thumb, and just sometimes I don't catch it and don't turn his mic off in time.
And for the folks that are listening, I just want to say I've never met anybody who actually tries not to grin, laugh, or in any way express enjoyment at a joke. I mean, you really just try not to do that, Bob. I don't get it.
It's really pretty easy, actually.
So Don Spear started this program years and years ago, and then I kind of was asked to do a show, and then it led to an every week thing, and then you took over, I believe, in 2001. Wasn't that?
2002.
Okay.
January 2002.
And you and I have continued on since then.
Yes.
For those that still remember Don Spear, he passed away this July, by the way, just to convey that to people that are listening. And he was a good man, and he really...
Yes, he was.
He really did a lot for a lot of people. So rest in peace, Don, and for those that remember him, he's gone, but we know where he is, and he's better off now. So I think that's a good thing to talk about, just to mention.
It's always... It seems like we just started doing this last year. I mean, for so many years we've done this, and I get to thinking about the things even today that I still don't know, and I do this program with you all these number of years. But it's just so complicated, and making mistakes is so easy, and overspending money on a problem that you may not even have. And people do this every single day. Then you've got the mechanics who are out to take advantage of you, just like in any other occupation.
Let me just say this about that. It is true, and mechanic, technician, grease monkey, whatever you want to label it, the industry is noted for corruption. I mean, let's just face it, everybody used to say that. Now, I will tell you that in the 46 years that I've been doing this, I have come to the conclusion it's not as bad as you think. There's not as many people out to rip you off as you think. I will tell you, some mistakes get made and unnecessary money gets spent, but it is not necessarily out of malice or intent. It is lack of knowledge. Young people doing things that they didn't know, they didn't do it on purpose, but they thought they were doing the right thing. I'll tell you, becoming an auto tech today requires an awful lot of information and an awful lot of education. It's not like the days of old when you opened the hood and the water pump was leaking and you had to take some bolts off and put a new water pump on. It's highly technical now. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot more pitfalls that you can fall in. So you have to really navigate that arena carefully, and it requires an awful big investment in the proper equipment, which is another problem that comes up. Sometimes the person may not be equipped to be able to communicate with the car computer like they should. Sometimes the knowledge isn't there, and most of the time it's not really done. It's not as bad as people think. There's an awful lot of good independent mechanics and dealer mechanics in shops. There's a lot of good ones. Unfortunately, like any other industry, there's always a few bad apples that give everybody a bad name.
Number to call if you want to ask Tony Joe a question. And as we talked about, we've been doing this a long time, and so he has no manuals or anything in front of me. He answers these questions. In fact, it's always interesting to me. Someone who calls in and says, I've been to 3 mechanics and they can't figure out what's wrong. And Tony Joe tells them on the spot what's wrong. So if you want to call in and talk to Tony Joe, 1-877-913-5357. We do have a line open.
Let me just tell you, Bob, that's not always the case. I mean, I know you're trying to promote a good, but I can't always just do that. It takes, sometimes just because 3 mechanics have looked at it, I am not that, how can I say, arrogant to think that I can just automatically fix it in 2 minutes. A lot of times I can. A lot of times I can give people some information that helps them solve the problem, and I'm willing to do that for as long as I'm alive. If you give me this forum, Bob, I will always come and try to help people, because that's how you pass things along, pay it forward. But I will tell you that some things are kind of tricky now, and it takes some investigation, and it takes a lot of experience, and it takes some knowledge, and sometimes it's a little harder to figure out, but I always do the best I can, and I will always do whatever I can do to help anybody. But I appreciate you pumping me up like that. I'm just not that...
Just say thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
What I thought we would do today is talk about some of what I call the best advice that I've heard through the years. And, the check engine light is this mysterious light that has so many different definitions to it as to what it means and what it is. The check engine light comes on, you don't know whether to panic or to just say, okay, well, I need to get this checked out. The thing, though, that most people are taught to think about the check engine light is that when it comes on, all you have to do is plug in a reader to it, and it tells you exactly what's wrong with the car, and you go fix that problem. When that is the furthest thing from the truth. of how, or the reality, let me say, of how it works. But that's, that is advertised nationally by a lot of shops.
A lot of parts stores.
Parts stores, right.
Because they want to sell parts. And that's understandable, the way they merchandise it. However, it's not really the whole story. Let me just start off by defining what the check engine light is there for. Why do we have a check engine light? Well, because if the EPA has mandated that we increase the tailpipe emissions. What is that? That's the amount of pollution coming out of the tailpipe, plain and simple. So the check engine light comes on for one reason and one reason only. Anything that alters the tailpipe emissions. So if your check engine light is on, you're altering the designed emissions, how many parts per million and all that are coming out of the tailpipe. You've altered that. Probably it's worse or it's out of spec. There's 100 things that can make that check engine light come on and alter the tailpipe emissions. However, some things are more serious than others. The most serious case would be if your engine starts to run funny or misfire. For those that know what that is, the check engine light will blink 1 time per second. It won't just come on steady, it'll flash 1 time per second. Now that's the most serious issue that you can confront with a check engine light. If that happens, you possibly can damage those expensive catalytic converters. So at that point, that's kind of a tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, I better get this thing into the shop and see what's wrong with it. Now, everything else, if the check engine light comes on and it stays on and the car's running fine, those aren't necessarily detrimental things that have to be taken care of immediately. Of course, you should have it looked at. But let me give you a quick for example, Bob. You got gas and you forgot to put the gas cap back on. And you drive down the street, and after about 30 or maybe an hour later, you're driving your car, and all of a sudden the check engine light comes on. Well, it just recognized, the computer just recognized that it did a test on the emission control system, and the test did not pass. It failed for some reason. It didn't hold pressure. So it flashes the check engine light, and it comes on the dashboard, and it lights up steady. Now, do you have to stop what you're doing and immediately pull over and get the car towed to the nearest shop because this is terrible problems for the car? No. You can drive the car like that. It's not like, it's an emergency situation. Eventually, you'll get the car checked, and somebody will check it and say, hey, you got this particular issue with the emission control system, and you pull the gas lid out and you find out the gas cap wasn't put on tight, or it wasn't put on at all, or it was left loose, or the seal was broken on it and it's worn out. But there's so many things that my advice in many cases, if the check engine light is on and the car seems to be running good, and you'll know because you're the one that drives it all the time, if it's running okay, then yeah, you need to have it looked at. Number one, it won't pass inspection if you're coming up for an inspection. And number two, you want to have it looked at anyway because we don't know what the problem is, but in many cases, it's a minor issue. So unless it's flashing 1 time per second, you can drive the car with the light on and then have it tested at your convenience. And then, of course, it'll have to be repaired before you can get an inspection. And you also want to know really what's wrong with the car, just for your information in case it's not something simple. So it's good to have it checked, and you need to have it checked. But sometimes it's not pull over to the side of the road and have it towed to a shop. It's not that detrimental to the car.
What you used to always say is that when the check engine light comes on and you plug in, what would you call it, a code reader?
Scan tool.
Scan tool.
Normally what we call it. Mm-hmm.
And you get the code that's coming out. That's not the problem necessarily. That's the first symptom and the first place that you start to look for the real problem. And that's probably that piece of advice right there. That reality, I think, has helped more people through the years of understanding really what's going on with that.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And there's a couple of really good analogies I can make for that. One that comes to mind right now, Bob, is just to make it kind of paint a visual for people to make it easy to understand. There's a misnomer about the scan tool that plugs into under the dash. We've all seen it. And they read codes and they get all the information. Well, people think that machine will tell you what's wrong with the car, and then all you have to do is replace that part, and your car is fixed. Well, that's really not the truth, as you just pointed out. Many times, the scan tool will guide you down the right path of diagnostic procedure without going down 16 other rabbit holes. It will get you going on the right path, but it doesn't tell you what's wrong with the car. If, a real good example, if the car was overheating and you saw the check engine light come on and they pulled the code and said, coolant sensor out of range, or coolant sensor too high. Okay, you don't, well, a lot of people do. You don't just change the coolant sensor. Don't blame the messenger. That guy is telling you that, reporting good information. It's saying, hey, this engine is too hot. Then you determine that there's a leaky hose clamp or something that connects to the radiator, and it's lost enough water to make the car overheat. So you tighten the clamp and you fill it back up with antifreeze or coolant, and then everything's okay again. You reset the check engine light, and everything is good. But that code had nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with the original root cause of the problem. You see?
Yeah.
So you can't go down, you can't always depend on the code.
You can also see where people really end up spending a lot of money on unnecessary parts.
And this is why a lot of unnecessary money gets spent, is because, like I said, a lot of guys, it's mainly not out of, want to rip you off. They don't really quite understand how the system works. And until they get a little more education, a little more sense, a little more experience under their belt, mistakes can be made.
1-877-913-5357. If you want to talk to Tony Joe, we do have a line open. 1-877-913-5357. I would get you watching TV at night, and they advertise these boxes that you plug into your car, your cigarette lighter, wherever you plug it into, and tell you exactly what's wrong with the car. Same type of concept.
It is. That's basically a inexpensive code reader, like we just talked about with the coolant sensor code. I mean, it's basically a code reader, but a scan tool does not just read codes. The scan tool is a fully bidirectional communication device that can talk to the computer on the car, and the computer on the car can give information to the scan tool, so you can actually test things, so you can get a better idea of what's wrong with the car. But there's nothing wrong with having a scan, one of those, I think, car dock or whatever they call it. There's nothing wrong with being able to access the codes. It gives you some idea, but just don't make the mistake of thinking that's telling you what's wrong with the car, and then go buy the part, put it on, only to find out that didn't do anything. It's still got the same problem.
1-877-913-5357 if you got a question for Tony Joe. Talk a little bit about, obviously, the check engine lights on the dashboard. There's also a lot of other lights that are really important that you need to familiarize yourself with.
There is.
That you may not think about.
Yes, and a lot of people don't understand this about those lights. If you have, let's say, an airbag light that's on, and it stays on, and you know it's on, but you haven't really bothered to get it checked out because it doesn't really affect the way the car runs or anything, that's okay. However, I must inform you, as the listeners, if that light is on, then the airbag system is down. It's like no power. It's like the whole town is out of power. That airbag will not go off for any reason. Even if you hit a telephone pole at 80 miles an hour, you're unprotected in the event of a crash. So if the warning light is on, the system is down. A lot of people get confused about that. They think that if the light is on, their airbag could blow off at any point, and they don't want that. Well, that's not how it works. The same goes for, say, the anti-lock brake system. If the anti-lock brake light is on, that means if you were to slam on the brakes, you would have no steering control, as in back in 1970, you had a car and it didn't have anti-lock brakes. You slammed on the brakes, the wheels would skid. We all know how that can happen. You slam on the brakes, the wheels skid. Well, when the ABS light is on, it doesn't affect your regular brake system. It is not designed to do that. It's built in conjunction with your regular brake system. However, it's important to know that if the ABS light is on and you get into a panic stop, your wheels will skid just like they did back in a 70 model car. And the reason the ABS is there is to protect the skidding from occurring so that it will give you the most efficient stopping distance, but yet maintain steering control. And there's a joke that goes around, it's like it won't prevent you from hitting the brick wall, but at least you can pick the spot you're going to hit. See, if the wheels skid, it's like being on ice. You have no steering ability. As opposed to anti-lock brake systems, if a ball runs out, if a ball rolls out into the road, you just know there's a child right behind it. So it gives you the ability to slam on your brakes and still maintain control. So we've talked this to death, but the anti-lock brake light comes on, the airbag light comes on, the check engine light comes on. There's a tire monitor light that comes on whenever it feels like it in most cars, and that really is not an essential thing, but it is annoying. The problem with that is mostly the system. The sensors in the wheel are bad, and they're not reporting, so the light comes on. Is that a big deal to worry about? No. Years ago, we just looked at our tires, and if they were flat, we knew it. And if they were down, we knew it. But you can leave that system until a later date. That's not one of the most serious systems. And I'm trying to think of what else is serious. There's power steering systems that are electronic now, and they have a light that comes on. And in most cases, if the power steering light comes on, you're going to discover that your car, it'll still steer. Don't think it won't steer, but it's very difficult. It's hard to steer. It takes 2 men and a boy to turn the wheel. And that system is down. So there's a lot of lights that can come on. Those are warning lights, and they're there for a reason. And they come on, and now you know what that means if they're on. It's up to you to drive the car and take that chance.
You mentioned the sensors for the tires to show that if a tire needs more air. Mm-hmm. How long do those typically last before you have to get those replaced?
Well, it's funny because I've seen some of them never have a problem, and they have batteries in them. They're not changeable batteries, but we as kids, Bob, we used to put air in our bicycle tires, and that little $2 valve stem that you put the air in from the gas station. Well, now that cheap little $2 valve stem is an elaborate valve stem, just like it used to be, but on the other end is a radio transmitter run by a battery, like a watch battery. Now, that thing is a microprocessor, and it emits a radio signal to a central computer under the dash of your car or under the console, and this, in turn, reports how much air is in the tire to each left rear, left front, right front. All four report, and in many cases, so does the spare. So if any one of those radio transmissions fail, that light will come on telling you better check your tires, you better, look at everything. And in many cases, you do need air in a tire, but sometimes there's no air needed. The sensor is actually bad, or the battery's gone dead, or the sensor has failed, in which case you got to go to like a tire shop. They got to remove the tire in order to replace this valve stem / sensor unit. And it, in many cases, is cost prohibitive for the little bit of benefit you're going to get out of it. So it's kind of one of those things you fix when you have the money and the time, and not necessarily an emergency.
You can always go the old-fashioned way of checking your air.
With a gauge.
With a gauge. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money radio show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Actually, we're doing the special Car Corner edition to Prudent Money. If you ever miss a program, and you can always listen to it as a podcast, and we do put that on the site, www.prudentmoney.com. If you have a question for me, please go to the website and just go to the link that says Ask Prudent Money, and we will take care of your question. Until we do meet again next time, keep the faith. Have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.